Welcome to Critical Thinking Required, hosted by LBW. This podcast is intended for free thinkers, entrepreneurs, and knowledge seekers. Join us as we discuss relevant financial topics, explore with guests their financial journeys, and engage with experts in industries such as space, media and entertainment, real estate, and many more. Buckle up and enjoy the ride. Welcome to Critical Thinking Required. You're with your host, myself, Tim Bickmore, and I got my partner in crime here, Gary Grosskopf. And today, Gary and I are going to talk a little bit more technology-based. So a couple of episodes ago, Gary and I talked about FedNow, which again, go check out that episode. It was a good one. It's becoming more of a hot topic. We may have to come and revisit it, Gary, at some point. But today, what we want to talk about is Chat GPT and Google Bard, and how it's going to potentially change the financial planning industry and what are the implications. So for today, though, we did it a little bit differently than we typically do. For our outline, we went ahead and asked Chat GPT and Google Bard to write us an outline for this podcast. So the prompt that we used for both systems was write a podcast outline on how Google Bard or Chat GPT, depending on what we inputted, will change the financial planning industry. And we got the outputs. And so what we're going to do is it's going to be a little interactive. We're going to walk you through how it laid the outline out and the questions. And Gary and I will answer the questions as we go. Gary's going to lead the outline, and we're going to talk through it about how this can potentially change things. Now, remember, this took us 2 minutes to put in the prompt, put it together, mesh it up. Not very long. So the speed was pretty quick. But before we get into our outline, for all of our listeners who may not know about Google Bard or ChatGPT, we just want to give a little bit of some definition. So I'm going to read a few things. And what we did is we went ahead and we asked ChatGPT what Google Bard was, and we asked Google Bard what ChatGPT was. Now, what was interesting is that ChatGPT, at least the systems that we have access to, by we, I mean us here at LBW, was only trained up to 2021. So it pumped out that it didn't know what Google Bard was. So in order for me to answer what is Google Bard, I had to ask Google Bard. Google Bard's response was this: I am Bard, a large language model, also known as a conversational AI or chatbot trained to be informative and comprehensive. I am trained on a massive amount of text data, and I'm able to communicate and generate human-like text in response to a wide range of prompts and questions. For example, I can provide summaries of factual topics or create stories. So that's what Google Bard is. Now, when we asked for what ChatGPT was, we used Google Bard. Google Bard's response was this: what is ChatGPT? ChatGPT is an AI chatbot developed by OpenAI and can hold conversations and answer questions. It is still under development, but it has already been used for a variety of tasks, including customer service, education, and healthcare. ChatGPT is built on top of OpenAI's GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 families of large language models, or LLMs, and has been fine-tuned using both supervised and reinforcement learning techniques. This means that it has been trained on a massive data set of text and code, and it has been taught how to respond to questions and prompts in a way that is both informative and engaging. So that is what ChatGPT is and what Google Bard is. Very simple. They're large language models that can be processed natural language. So you can ask it questions and it can give you a response based off the data in which it's been trained on. Now, one really quick thing that we want to talk about, because we're comparing the two, right? Google Bard, which is currently in an experimental mode for Google. ChatGPT is open to the public, also kind of experimental, but they've created more of a business around it. So I asked Google Bard if ChatGPT was a competitor. And this is what Google Bard had to say. I would say that ChatGPT and I are both competitors and collaborators in the field of large language models. We both are trying to develop models that can understand and respond to human language in a natural and informative way. However, we're taking different approaches to this goal. ChatGPT is based on OpenAI's GPT 3.5 and GPT 4 families of large language models, while I am based on Google's Lambda language model. This means that we have different strengths and weaknesses. ChatGPT is better at generating text, while I am better at understanding and responding to questions. Ultimately, I believe that the best way to develop large language models is through collaboration and competition. By working together, we can learn from each other and develop models that are even more powerful and capable. So that is what ChatGPT and Google Bard is. And that's how they see, at least Google Bard views ChatGPT as a competitor. They're very similar, but maybe have some different strengths and weaknesses based off of some of the language, which, to be honest, Gary and I don't really know that much. We're not going to be talking about the underworkings of large language models. But what we are going to talk about is we're going to talk about how this type of technology could be disruptive to the financial planning industry, both some of the pros and some of the weaknesses. But again, the outline Gary is going to go through was developed from these models, which is fun. All right, Gary. All right. I set it up. You got to take us home.
Swing home. So, like any good outline, told us to do an introduction. Which we did.
We did.
So we're following it to the T. Both ChatGPT and Bard told us to do an introduction. Told us to introduce the topic of how it's poised to revolutionize the financial planning industry, and I'm sure it will do some big changes.
Yes.
And also to briefly explain what ChatGPT is and its capabilities.
All right. So I'm going to be the one that's trying to answer. So I'm going to be ChatGPT and Google Bard myself, and then try to divulge what I think I know.
Tim GPT.
Tim GPT. Here we go. So introduce the poised revolutionize. So how it's poised to revolutionize the financial planning industry. So when it comes to the financial planning industry, there's a lot of, off the get-go, there's a lot of articles that have said, be wary of ChatGPT, be wary of a Google Bard for a lot of good reasons, which we'll hit on. But overall, where I believe that it can revolutionize what we're doing is the speed and effectiveness of gathering that information, right? A lot of financial planning is looking at data, understanding that data, understanding what are the complexities, but understanding the qualitative, the quantitative, mixing those two things together, and then regurgitating a response or recommendations. Like, it's literally part of the CFP wheel. And where this technology could potentially help is speed up that process for a planner, where now you may have to have, many people do it, or you may have yourself be doing it. And it can take a lot of time to research in Google and search. So for example, Gary and I talk a lot about the IRS website. Oh my gosh. Have you ever tried to look up an answer on the IRS website or any tax related question? It's complicated. It's deep. It's a lot of language. It's a lot of lawyer language. ChatGPT, maybe you can ask it a question and then it can regurgitate in a natural way what that means, right? And that is quick, that is efficient, that is fast. So it speeds up the process, which then allows you to get to an answer quicker, faster, better. So that's a small example of potentially how it could revolutionize more on the back end and the work that which planners do. And it could speed up that process.
It's kind of an extension of what we already do with Google in the first place. Is a lot of us ask Google long form prompted questions to which it throws back some possibilities of what it thinks we want to see. This is just the big next step to, hey, actually, you don't have to just pick the first thing. I'll pick what I think is what you're looking for.
Yeah, which is powerful, which is very powerful. Yeah.
The next step in our journey is ChatGPT thought we should give a little background on the financial planning industry.
Yes, and Google Bard did not give us a prompt on this one. So this is specifically ChatGPT, and they asked, what is the traditional model of financial planning? And I think Gary and I were talking about this subject specifically. There's 3 different questions. And I guess I should, state that it's discuss the traditional model of financial planning, identify the limitations of a traditional model, and explain how technology could begin to disrupt the financial planning industry. When Gary and I were talking about the specific section, I said, Gary, well, I'm just going to talk about LBW. And what does LBW do? Because at the end of the day, it's a good representation of these specific questions. So to go back, the traditional model of financial planning, I'd actually argue that I don't even know if there was a traditional model. The CFP is probably the most traditional model of financial planning on how they expect a planner to do their work. Again, I talk a lot about like the 7-step or 8-step process, engage with the client, gather information, analyze information, develop recommendations, present recommendations, and then monitor and implement, right? Or implement, then monitor. That is the flywheel in which financial planners are expected to do. But if you look more broad-based or general, a lot of advisors sometimes don't do that. They're more on the asset management side because of how we get paid, potentially, like under assets under management. So that model was more focused on asset management. So what's interesting about this question is, how could it disrupt the asset management space? And how could it disrupt the financial planning space? So LBW, the reason why it's a good example is we started very traditionally more on the asset management, not saying that we don't do that, but it was more of a sole focus. And we've grown into a bigger planning type firm based off how our services are. And when we first started, our needs for this type of technology might look very different. So to give an example of a potential need is, let's look at Nathaniel within LBW. Nathaniel is a stock researcher. He has to read through a lot of 10Qs, 8Ks, all of this documentation. ChatGPT could be a very powerful tool to ask questions to those documents in which Nathaniel's trying to look for, or there might be things that he has missed, right? Or it could catch because it could read through all of the fine print, all of the detailed information, probably 10 times faster or more than Nathaniel could, right? So then you can pick up that speed. So the quickness of analysis could enhance, which means you could do more, right? It's almost becomes a superpower in that way. That's a very just finite, small example of the potential there. But then if you were to switch over, and as where the industry is moving, is that technology's already started to compress the fee compression on the asset management side. So now people have engaged into this new model, which is financial planning, which, to go back to the traditional model of the CFP. The hard part is, traditionally people are going to do that type of work once a year. They're going to gather all the information, they're going to look at it, and then they're going to provide, typically where people look at retirement projections. Where the world is moving is that we're looking at to get into less forecasting of a long-term future to what I like to consider micro forecasting. Hey, Gary, what happens if I buy a new house? Hey, Gary, what happens if I spend $10,000 on this new boat? Hey, Gary, what if I move states? What happens, right? Those are the questions that we are receiving, in which we then need to produce an answer for. Those questions are complex, and that also means we need access to the data on an ongoing, consistent basis to be able to produce the most accurate recommendations that we can. It also includes understanding who our client is. So if you start thinking about where the new model's going from a Chat GPT perspective, where it could revolutionize, is to help us gather that information quicker, faster, and better in a quicker manner, which means we can take on more clientele, which means we can service more people, which actually then expands financial services to a larger group of people in general. And not to get into the details, but specifically natural language processing could help with that. I'll use the example I just mentioned with tax documents, or looking at the IRS. Gary and I have looked at the IRS many times, to ask, and you can search the IRS, but typically what we're doing is we're doing Control F, find this specific term, and then where's it in within this, lengthy document? Where's the nuance? If Gary and I could go and ask the specific question we're looking for and have it pull up really quick, right? That's going to speed our process to get to that information faster, which in all reality, our clients, we are conditioned to get answers now. And it's hard to do that when you're asking more complex questions and that have more nuance to, for example, the tax code. The tax code is full of it. So that's where it could potentially help when it comes to all of that. So there's a little bit of background where it's kind of moving, how it's going, in my opinion.
Well, the next step in this, which we did touch on a little bit here, both Chat GPT and Google Bard wanted to know the role of Chat GPT in financial planning. So mainly they wanted to know how to explain what Chat GPT can improve upon in the traditional model of financial planning, like you explained before, highlight some of the specific ways that Chat GPT can help financial planners and their clients. And even as a subcategory to that, it wanted to know how to talk about streamlining data collection and analysis, providing personalized investment recommendations, and automating routine tasks. Also, this very long outline that it produced, improving communications and customer service.
So yes, and that was all based off of Chat GPT. So Chat GPT asked all of those. And so one of the things that I wanted to talk about is highlight these specific ways. So let's use, for example, streamlining data collection and analysis. So one way that you could streamline data analysis or collection is that, let's say that you want to ask a question to someone's financial data, right? That's a big one. So let's say that I want to know why Gary's free cash flow changed from month over month, right? And free cash flow, when I say that for the general public, would be what was your income for the month, what were your expenses, and what was left over. We consider that free cash flow. That can be positive, that can be negative, that could be zero. Just depends on the month. So if I wanted to ask, for example, why that happened, there is a real realm in a real world, which we are getting close to, where you can ask that type of a question and you can then receive an answer based off that data set. That could speed up the process for us analyzing that information. When it comes to the collection of information, there's a lot of things that we can do, which we are working on as well. Is we are very big believers when it comes to transactional level data. Not because we want to be granular and know everything that everyone spends, but because it's a general ledger, and a general ledger is very important. If you then have access to that general ledger, what we can do is have more information about what those transactions are. What a lot of people don't realize on the back end of a lot of these structures is that transactional level information comes from different sources and is not always organized in the same way, which is hard because we want to know what we want to categorize it. If we're not categorizing our information correctly, then Chat GPT can't do its job. So in order to categorize it appropriately, we need to understand what it means and what it is. I don't know what restaurants are in, Georgia. I don't know what that is. It could be a nail salon, right? But because Google Bard and Chat GPT are now looking to have plugins to the internet, we are already manually doing that to try to understand more information, but that can do it on our behalf, and it can do quickly, and it can be more accurate, and it can give us more information to provide more insights to the end client, which is extremely helpful. It's one example, right? Another example is I'll use the IRS. I mean, the IRS website is just a killer one. That's collection of information as well. What's going on? What's happening? We could also take it to this next step of looking at someone's 1040. Tell me what Gary's taxable income was for 2021. Tell me what Gary's, gross profit or gross or wages were for 2021. Tell me what, if he has a Schedule C, does he have a Schedule S, right? To be able to ask questions and to query that information and then pull it out can be really, really powerful. Are those things here yet? No, but are they going to be here soon? Yeah, I think that's going to be quicker than we think, specifically on that.
How do you think it'll give personalized investment advice?
Oh, this is an interesting one. I think that Google Bard and ChatGPT have this one a little bit wrong, personally. And I think that this is where we'll get into it, is the nuance or the concerns, is that giving personal investment recommendations, I should take a step back. Technically speaking, robo-advisors right now are doing it, right? They already have certain models in which they use that they apply. And then they're running on a certain system that someone has built, right? An algorithm or a computer code to run modern portfolio theory or a certain asset allocation strategy. So that's where it could really kind of boil it down. I think that if Chat GPT somehow is able to gather all this information, how everybody was allocated and what that would look like, and then had all people's risk tolerances and it can compare, then maybe it could start producing some of those investment recommendations because it has a data set that it could use to query from. But that's a unique data set. And the hard part is it gets more nuanced on that, because risk tolerance, as much there are tools for risk tolerance is a really difficult thing. It's not that easy, because you may fit, like Gary, for example, may fit the bucket of a young individual who can take on risk, who should be in the markets because of his age and assets, right? But what if Gary just really doesn't like volatility, right? And it stresses him out and it makes him nervous. It's hard to capture some of those risk metrics within a questionnaire. So then you have to question if ChatGPT is using that information to then go ahead and look at its risk tolerance to apply a personalized investment recommendation. I don't know. I had another question too that came up over the weekend that said, hey, could ChatGPT and Google Bard do stock arbitrage and look at different prices? That maybe. I would be hard pressed to say that isn't already happening at a large scale at some big investment banks and some bigger brokers. that have developed technology that's probably similar, not Chat GPT and asking it questions, but running just, different algorithms or artificial intelligence to see that, especially in commodities compared to exchanges. I don't know that at all. Like, that's a complete hypothetical guess, but yeah, maybe it could. But like, when you start getting into some of these nuanced areas, I think all of a sudden you have to be very weary of what it's going to apply. And so the personalized investment recommendations, it makes me queasy on that one personally. I like the collection of data better because it's more objective and not so subjective.
Same. There's a lot that goes into personal investment.
Yeah.
I mean, like you talked about age, risk tolerance, just the timeline of what your goal is, not even just the age. People's emotions towards investments, ESG scores that people are very tied to.
Good point too. Yeah, ESG is that's a whole nother ball of wax, but that's a really good point. Yeah.
Automating routine tasks.
Automating routine tasks. I think that's a pretty good, straightforward answer. I think like asking questions to the data, understanding. I think at some point you can get to asking questions to model things for you. You're like, hey, what happens if? I think that could be a very real thing. I think it's just then dependent on what the chatbot or that type of model is what data it's applying to. Routine task. We talk about transactions. I mean, whew, beautiful. That's chef's kiss right there. That's a big one. Yes. And it can make it so much more personalized. Like, we're excited about that specifically in that realm. But outside of routine tasks, I think that's a kind of a low hanging fruit where you're going to see a lot of the back end that the client may not experience, but for us as advisors could be really, really powerful to help us not lose quality, but increase speed and accuracy, which is really great.
And I think that ties into the next bullet point here is improving communication and customer service, especially speed.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. I mean, customer service and communication and speed. And I think what is also is the accuracy. I think your accuracy could get even better. And you can get more personalized, right? And that is really where I think the world is moving. We talk a lot about that at LBW. We had our semi-annual meeting, and one of our top key tenets for operations is it personalized? And if it's not, we don't necessarily want to do it, because we believe that finance is a personalized situation. And technology like this can help you do personalization potentially at scale, which is really, really exciting. Ooh, got some more from Bard, huh?
We do. So on the same prompt of highlighting some specific ways that Chat GPT can help financial planners, Google Bard asked, or I guess it's more of an answer, isn't it? Is Google Bard says to save more money by creating personalized budgets and investment plans.
Yeah, which is very similar to what ChatGPT said about personalized, but budgets. Budgets, they start talking more about personalized budgets, which is kind of interesting, the nuance between the two. Yes, you could personalize budgets. I think the budgets come back to your transaction level data, how you're categorizing that, how you're kind of going about it. There's other technology that I think is coming in to help with some of that as well. But yes, that is a big piece of it that could help. We here at LBW, I think where the budgets could get better is more from the analytics of your information to understand where you're spending and what you value. And I think there's different ways to be able to go about that in different things, which hopefully we'll get to at some point. We can talk about that. We're not quite there yet, but I don't know that ChatGPT is much on the personalized budget, other than asking questions of like I'll ask Gary, hey Gary, how many times did you go to Chick-fil-A this month?
More than I can cover. And
then ChatGPT will tell Gary exactly how many times you went to, Chick-fil-A, which I've gotten a lot of questions of. I don't want to know that number. It's fair. So that's where it can maybe do on the budget side.
What about making better financial decisions by providing access to unbiased information and advice?
Struggle with this one.
Bias is a big one in these chatbots.
Yes, it is. And Gary was talking about hallucinations.
Yeah. So what A term that's arisen from using these chatbots is that these chatbots are really good at giving a really confident answer, but it's not always right. So they kind of call it a hallucination, like it's living in a different world and it's giving a hallucinated answer as to what it thinks is correct.
Yes. And that, which is actually quite fascinating. They call it hallucination. And so I was like, of course they call it hallucinations. I think the unbiased, I'm going to pick on the unbiased part. And again, I'm going to come from an opinion that is, I don't research this. It's a little bit unfounded, but I'm going to state it anyways, is in my mind, from a logical perspective, if we are building these models, humans are building these models, then inherently there is going to be a bias to these models because we have inherent biases regardless if we want them or not. And that means that if we're building it, then it's probably very hard to have unbiased opinions within it. I think that you would then have people who can be malicious or malintent and then be able to enter in information or flood information or train information that could be inaccurate, which could be very hard to decipher if it's real or not real. I think that unbiased part of Google Bard is, I don't know how accurate that could be, truly.
Right. You have to remember that a lot of what Chat GPT and Bard are bringing up, like you said, are made by humans. In Bard's example, it does look at Google searches.
Yep.
Right? So you say, do I need life insurance? If it Googles that life insurance, the first things will come up are people that sell life insurance.
Could be, yeah.
Is it going to tell you that, yes, it's a good idea, you should buy it? Because that's what came up in its first 10 searches. Or is it going to come up with a contrarian opinion and look at other data as to maybe why not to do it?
That's a really good point. And it's a good question of how is it getting to its recommendation? And if you don't know how it's getting to its recommendation, then how do you know if it's biased or unbiased? And I think that is a big potential pitfall when you're looking at our industry specifically. All right, what do we go? We got one more for this one?
I think we do. Reach their financial goals sooner by taking advantage of automated investing and other features.
To reach financial goals sooner. Ooh, let's pick on that a little bit. Why Google Bard? Why do you think that? Well, Google Bard is not taking into consideration the human element. Just because you have a good strategy, just because you have a good plan, does not mean that end client is going to take advantage of it and does not mean that they're going to implement it. And I don't care what kind of technology you have, doesn't mean people are going to follow through. And that is the human element that cannot be taken over by ChatGPT and Google Bard. So to say sooner, maybe if you create it because it's automated, which there's been a lot of talk in our industry when it comes to forcing people to enroll into 401ks and an automatic contribution. There's been a lot of studies on that from a behavioral perspective. If you literally force it upon people, then sure, they could reach it sooner. But then the question is, do people, should you do that, right? Is that really the benefit of the person? Because Gary and I have talked about this in the past. Let's say that person who is automatically enrolled and who's forced in and does not know any different, can't take out. What if they don't have positive cash flow? What if they can't contribute to their 401k because they need the cash to pay for rent? Right now, it's can be on the other extreme, but that's the point is that it's just because it's the fit for some doesn't mean it's the fit for all. And going back to where we sit at LBW, hyper personalized. Now, if we can get to that point with technology like this, I'm all for it. But that one kind of like goals sooner. I don't know for sure.
Yeah, I'm not sure either.
Yeah, I'm on the fence on that.
So the next topic on our list here.
Stay tuned for the second part of the episode.
Like and subscribe.
Thank you for taking the time to start your journey of thinking differently and listening to LBW talk about stuff they love. Until next time.